Hey, everybody. Sunday morning breakfast with the coach. Just waiting for everybody to show up, and we'll get started soon enough. So, yeah, switching gears this week. So I'm just waiting for everyone to get on board, and then we'll begin the conversation. So hopefully everyone will have a lot to say, and people will jump on board, and we'll get started. Let me know when you're out there. Hey, Mike. And we'll get going. So hopefully everyone had notification and we'll get started. And yeah, everybody make sure my sound is good and my picture's good. You can hear and see me okay. And we'll just wait for people to jump on board. So lots to say. Some of it might be controversial, but the truth often is. So getting all our usual suspects on board, and then we'll begin the broadcast. So I'm just waiting for everyone to get on board. And then by all means, this one is more of a conversation than a lecture. So I'll be conversating with people to get you to think about things to dig deeper. As you can see, the subject matter at hand is foundations for achievement. And, I've been coaching people since the early to mid 80s in terms of physique transformation and all the rest, and life transformation. And I've seen it all in terms of how people achieve and how people succeed and the reasons why they don't. So that's very, very important stuff. So I thought it was worthy of talking about. So here's the thing, I've been doing the last several weeks research. And it's very seldom in my work as a coach that I'm sending someone a piece of research to make the difference in their achievement of a physique transformation or sticking to their diet or not. So the focus out there in the online world is, appear to be scientifically informed, seek information, blah, blah, blah. And those things are all well and good. But I've never known it to mark the difference between achieving a goal or not achieving a goal. Usually when I'm interacting with a client, very seldom am I sending them a piece of research. So I've been doing, a lot of research the last several weeks to point out mostly online frauds and fads and scams and gimmicks, but other research as well in terms of what science and research has to say. But you know what, you can get carried away with that. And I think we were getting carried away with that, as informative as it is and shiny new object as it is online. People are attracted to it. It doesn't mark the difference between what helps someone achieve a goal versus not achieve a goal. So, I set some pretty high bodybuilding standards in my day before I knew a tenth of the stuff I know now. So it had nothing to do with my knowledge base that I was able to achieve. And that's the kind of stuff that I want to talk about, the real foundations for achievement, what it takes, what it's composed of, and all those other things as well. So it's very, very important. So for those of you who don't know, you can go to my website, Scott Abel Fitness, and you can get my free book, The Mindset of Achievement, there. And not that this is based on that, but we will certainly be talking a lot about that as well. So that's my book right there, Mindset of Achievement. And we're going to be talking about, what does it take to achieve and sustain a goal? Because most people are on the wrong track. I mean, how much information can you accumulate before it's not helping you anymore? So these are the things that you need to pay attention to and get involved in, et cetera, et cetera. So can everybody see that graphic, or should I shrink my big fat noggin so you can see the picture a little clearer? Let me know on that, because I'm going to do a quick PowerPoint, and hopefully people can get involved with some of their own points. I'm going to use my own personal story at the end. People often find that interesting, so we will delve into that at the end as well. So, but that's the book, scottablefitness.com/achieve. There's even scottablefitness.com/starter, I believe it is, where you can get this book plus the 4-day intro to Met training. So very important stuff. So picture small. Okay. How's this then? Is that any better, folks? You like that one a little bit better? Let me know on that. If that picture's better, then we'll get going. So important stuff. So I wrote a few things down actually, and a lot of it was just based on interacting with my clients this week, and things that I noticed and things that I need to talk about. And I thought it would be a good way to introduce people to a mindset of achievement. So hopefully Tracy's just saying that the book is a good read. And this isn't really like the contents of the book that I'm doing here. This was just riffing. But hopefully everyone can see this. And it's the picture's now good. I shrunk my big fat noggin, so the picture should be bigger. My picture is smaller. But like car mirrors say, objects in mirror are a lot better looking than they appear. So keep that in mind. All right, so let's get into the mindset of achievement. Too often, I think what people do when they get into this, who struggle, is they don't identify what it is they're after. So, I want to lose weight. Well, that doesn't really say anything. I want to transform my body. Those are, to your brain, those aren't things that channel any kind of energy in a specific direction. So these are the things you got to break it down to. I have a goal I've never reached before. What does that goal require of me? Forget about the goal itself. What's required of me to reach that goal? That's the important thing. So most of the time, any kind of lofty goal is going to be composed. The process itself is going to be composed of 3 very specific things: high standards, strict rules, and high expectations. I can give you a quick example off the top of my head that I was going to do further down, and I'll probably reiterate. When I was trying to get into university at high school, I knew that there was higher standards versus just going out of high school to get a job. I didn't have to worry about my grades. But if I wanted to get into a good university and a good university program, then that required of me higher standards in terms of study habits and grades, stricter rules in order to adopt those study habits and get those grades, and of course the higher expectations of getting into a good university, which reinforce the first 2 things. So here's what I'm saying: you can't just tell your brain, I have a goal to lose weight. When you do that, all of you have probably gone through this, where you experience the honeymoon period where everything's wonderful and great, and then it all comes crashing down because your brain has no specific standard of context to latch onto and be aware of and adopt to and abide in. So first things first, what you've got to do is you've got to set higher standards, adopt stricter rules, and then these are the important elements if you have higher expectations. Higher expectations can mean anything. It can mean just sculpting your physique. It can mean having a fitness lifestyle you've never had before that fits into your life. It can mean losing 50, 60, 100 pounds. If you've never done it before, then getting it requires higher expectations, and there's no way around that. So too many people don't seem to understand that. Taking care of high achievement has nothing to do with convenience, and that's an important thing. So that's something to keep in mind. So the 3 components for foundations of achievement are to realize higher standards, stricter rules, and higher expectations. And if that's bitter medicine to you, then the first problem there is that you're suffering from stinking thinking, because that shouldn't be bitter medicine. If it's reality, then you accept reality on reality's terms. So this is what is required to reach any lofty goal. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense to people. In other words, you can't have the wants without the do's. Okay, you can want to lose 50, 60 pounds. You can want to look like you could step on a physique stage. You can have all the wants in the world, but if you're not doing anything to achieve and sustain them, then you're just living in fantasy land. And too many people don't think they're living in fantasy land, but they actually are living in fantasy land. So no perks without the works is what we like to say. And that can't be a sometimes thing, no matter what else is going on. Oftentimes, people will write me in their feedback, and it'll be a lot of stuff like everything was going fine, and then situation X happened, and situation Y happened, and situation Z happened. And these weren't even really big, important things that were happening. They were just typical things that are going to happen in everyone's day-to-day life. So what they were really saying is the convenience of sticking to my process was interrupted. Therefore, I didn't stick to my process. If it was a matter of convenience, then I wouldn't have a job and this industry wouldn't exist. If everyone could just reach a goal in a matter of convenience of what fits into their day, time, life, work, family, relationships, then everyone would reach their goal. So you can have all the wants in the world, but you're never going to achieve anything without the do's. So don't focus on, I want to lose this much weight, I want to have abs, I want to do these things. Focus on the process. And as the Zen expression is that I'm always saying to everybody, the process is the goal and the goal is the process. And you've got to keep that real. Now, I realized that in this webinar, what I'm talking about, I'm talking to a mature audience, because people in their 20s, they're not going to get this. They're going to go online. They're going to go to Instagram, to the shiny new object syndrome, and the people with the tight butts doing the sideways poses, or the guys with abs doing the six-pack poses, and yada, yada, yada. But I'm talking about people who haven't been there, done that. And if you're a trainer out there, you have to keep in mind the mindset of the trainee. If they've never lived this way, then that's what you have to induce in somebody, is the foundations for achievement. So very, very important stuff. So then if you set stricter rules and higher standards and you have high expectations, then what comes along with that is pressure to perform. The pressures for higher achievement, the pressures for me to getting into university, the pressures for me doing well at university, the pressures for me, as a bodybuilder early in my career, the pressures are greater, but you should want them to be greater. And that's another mistake people make in the foundations of achievement. Pressure is perception. All right. You invite pressure, not for drama, so you can go online and go, oh, look at all the stuff I'm dealing with in my life. You invite pressure for challenge and for growth. If it wasn't hard, what would be the point in doing it? And no one seems to remind themselves of that when the chips are down. So it's easy to toss the process when the chips are down, but the process is actually what will eventually become a grounding force. And we'll talk about that as well. So very, very important stuff. So some exceptions to my comment on the people in their 20s, Max, is quick to point out. There are some higher awareness youngsters on there that'll understand this. But you know what? It took me a while to understand it. And most of my understanding of foundations of achievement have come in retrospect, by looking back on my life and the things that set the base and the foundation that allowed me to now live a life of design. And I feel fortunate that from a very young age, I've been able to live a proactive life and not a reactive one. I've never had to worry about seeking a job. I've never had to worry about compensating for my body, none of these things. And it was all from the discipline from a young age. But along with higher expectations and stricter rules, all right, comes a pressure to perform. All right. And that pressure should be something that you invite, not something that scares you. And it's not for drama, but it's for challenge and growth. Otherwise, what would be the point? So that's very important as well. So stricter rules. You acknowledge this as the mature approach. All right. Sure. Any youngster is going to rebel against discipline. Any youngster is going to rebel against rules. And the phrase rules are made to be broken. That's all pretty infantile stuff. Stricter rules are there for a reason rules set the path, set the process, set the boundaries. Everything about rules is something that you should also be inviting as the mature approach to a foundation of achievement. And how come as adults, we regress to being children when it comes to all of this? We let our wants overcome our process in a matter of convenience, or when things interrupt, things like that. So we choose the infantile over the mature when it comes to rules being stricter. Rules being stricter means it doesn't apply to me if I'm going through X, Y, or Z. You can't let other people dictate the direction of your process. All right. And that's a real important thing. So I'm going to copy that and post that for you there. So I see this all the time, that people let other people dictate the direction of their process. So, and becoming infantile. I don't understand this thing where people need to have okay, I'm getting some comments finally. I don't understand this infantile need adults have to stretch out things like celebrations and whatnot. Like when I was 9 or 10 years old, if I had a birthday, I didn't get to celebrate it for a week. I didn't get to celebrate it for 4 days. I didn't get to celebrate it for 5 days because the family wanted to do it this day and my friends wanted to do it that day, and all this. This is what I'm talking about. You can't let other people dictate the direction of your process, but you also have to be mature about what stricter rules mean. So, unless you're planning something with a significant other, like married couples plan an anniversary vacation, they go away for 3 days. Other than that, you have to take the mature approach. For me, what that means, for instance, myself, if my birthday isn't on a Sunday, which is my refeed day, then I just wait till Sunday and celebrate my birthday. I'll just celebrate it with more birthday centric kinds of items. So you can't just interrupt what it takes, those higher expectations and those stricter rules. You can't just interrupt them willy-nilly, because before you know it, all of a sudden Friday is an exception and Saturday's an exception, and then I worked hard all week, so I deserve. It's, that starts creeping into the mental framework. I deserve this or I deserve that. No, what you really are saying is I want this and I want that. Again, the infantile ego comes in, and you have to be aware of keeping that. So this is another one of those foundations of achievement. Your behavior always tells you the truth in any given moment of what you really want. Do you really want this higher, lofty goal that requires stricter rules, higher expectations, higher elevation of process? Because your behavior tells you how sincerely you really want that. So if you're willing to interrupt that because it's a friend's birthday or your birthday or the in-laws are in town, then that tells you your level of sincerity in your commitment to a foundation of achievement. People don't like hearing that. That's the truth. And, that's another reason that sets those who achieve apart from those who don't. And we have that all the time. For instance, feel free to comment, folks, because I'm going to bring them in as soon as I'm done here. Very important stuff. But people don't like hearing this, right? They want to go and they want to do a search for information. They want to search, what does Scott have to say about keto diet? But this person said this about keto diet. And what about this? And meanwhile, all the time, what they're never questioning is their own foundations for achievement. So you can go round and round in circles seeking information, but what's grounding you in your pursuit of the goal and the sustaining of that goal? So these are important things that too many people aren't looking at, and you have to look at them. How does it fit into your life? Had a client write me this week who now is challenged because his significant other is starting to say the usual things I hear from people who come into a relationship with someone who's already living the fitness lifestyle, and then it becomes sort of the penguin effect, I call it, where it's like wah, 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 wah. And it's like, you're no fun, you're too strict, I don't like living this way, you're always working out, you're keeping me from having a good time, and yada yada yada. Well, those are one of the challenges that you have to face of what matters more and what you're going to choose. So that's just one of those realities that no one wants to talk about. So keep in mind, switching gears here, higher expectations come with baggage. If you expect a lot for yourself, then you better start expecting a lot from yourself. And that's what I'm talking about as well. Sacrifice. Sacrifice is part of any higher achievement. And I don't mean sacrifice on a Friday night, like I mentioned earlier. I mean constant sacrifice until it's no longer sacrifice. So it's a sacrifice in your mind until it becomes a lifestyle. Then it's just how you live. And then it's just following the process because the process dictates the goal. So Max is just saying he's dealing with a lot of this right now because he's only 23 and no one understands his disciplined lifestyle. And they try to make him feel bad about it. They'll call him grandpa and stuff like that. But, this is one of those things. Are you going to let other people direct your process? Are you going to let them influence your process? Unfortunately, I was always immune to the peanut gallery. Never really bothered me. And I think that's one of the reasons I end up where I'm at now. The only thing special about me is I never succumbed to peer pressure. I was usually the one directing it. And I think that's important as well. So that's important stuff to think about. But if you have high expectations, that comes with collateral expectations, collateral damage, collateral effects, collateral consequences, and sacrifice. Until this becomes part of who you are, then it's sacrifice up front. And then once it becomes part of how you think, behave, act, then it's no longer sacrifice. It's just how you choose to live your life. Myself, I get up at 4 a.m. every single day, 7 days a week. It's not a sacrifice for me. It's how I choose to live my life. And that's a very, very important thing. If you're looking at your diet or your workout regimen as sacrificing other things, you're never going to last because you haven't gone to higher standards for yourself, stricter rules, and the higher expectations. So you have to keep that in mind. What is my goal composed of, right? My goal is composed of high standards, stricter rules, and higher expectations. So very, very important. Now, how do I accomplish those things? What are the foundations of achievement for those things? Structure and regimentation are grounding forces, and these things are mandatory, not optional. So, like I said before, there was a lot of people who are sort of on the cusp. They're kind of getting it, kind of not getting it as they go along. And structure and regimentation are something that's like bitter medicine to them. But if you look at any successful industry in the world, they are all premised on structure and regimentation. Look at military, look at industry. There's a reason pro sports teams practice at a certain time, do pregame rituals, have a team meal. Structure and regimentation are part of the process, and they're grounding forces. Another factor to me that amazes me, again, if we go back to higher expectations, higher standards, stricter rules, those higher standards, then structure and regimentation are going to be part of your higher standards. And a lot of people, as soon as something complicates their life, they toss the structure and regimentation that would actually ground them. So, people will have a fight with a spouse or always be at war with the spouse's in-laws or something. And then they will abandon the diet. They'll abandon the workout. So I didn't work out this week because X happened and Y happened and Z happened, or I went off my diet because I was frustrated by such and such. And then there's other people who, in the midst of real big, holy crap life events, they count on the structure and regimentation that are grounding forces. And give you an example there. When my father passed in 2016, I was responsible for, estate and all that stuff. I had to fly back east, still got up at 4:00, still went over to Tim Hortons, and with my mind being a jumble of 1,000 different things, the grounding and structure and the regimentation helped me get through all that. So I would stick to my 4 a.m. call, have my coffee, go to the gym. It didn't matter what kind of workout I had. It wasn't about that. And it wasn't about, oh no, if I don't go, I'll get fat. It wasn't about any of those things. It was just that structure and regimentation give you strength when you need it the most. And what you see all the time is that people abandon that when it counts the most. Those people are never going to establish the foundations for achievement, and they're never going to achieve their goal. So structure and regimentation, and I write about it in my book, Beyond Metabolism. It's all in there about the importance of structure and regimentation when it comes to diet strategy. So very, very important stuff. Same thing with sleep times, wake up times. Research shows over and over again, regular sleep and wake times have probably the biggest impact on weight control and weight loss. So people don't seem to understand that. But again, if we go back to the very first bullet, or the very first slide here, higher standards, stricter rules, higher expectations. Oh, well, I don't want to live that way. Well, then you're not establishing foundations for achievement. So your goal now is just a want. It's just a fantasy. So this is why it's important stuff. Structure and regimentation are grounding forces. So the next thing, the important thing is these are the facts of life. All right. This is a reason why mediocrity is what it is. And what bothers me in watching the millennials and everything else is mediocrity has somehow subconsciously become the high standard. It's now, what people aim for is mediocrity, which makes no sense to me. You're never going to get anywhere in this world aiming for mediocrity or aiming to fit in or any of these other things along those lines. So when you truly abide in all of these things that I've pointed out and live them, you'll always live a life of design and a life that you thrive in. When you truly abide and live by higher standards, stricter rules, and higher expectations, that frees you. These aren't things that imprison you. That's a perception. That's a perspective. These are things that liberate you from other constraints in order to be of tunnel vision to get what you want and want what you get. When you live by higher standards, stricter rules, and higher expectations, you no longer struggle, you deal with. And those are very, very different mindsets from the foundation of achievement. Clients will write me all the time, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that. Whereas my high performers, my high achievers, they're dealing with, oh, this happened this week, but I didn't miss any workouts. This happened this week and I'm tired, but I stayed with my schedule. You can listen to my podcast with Trevor Timmons, assistant GM of the Montreal Canadiens, who lives a real high pressure job. Every move he makes is subject to public scrutiny online, on Twitter, and all the rest of it, and all the haters and the hate fans. And yet he travels all around the world. Sometimes he's in 4 time zones in a week, travels 250 days a year. He doesn't struggle with his diet and he doesn't struggle with his training. He deals with the challenges that pop up. And he also lives a life of structure and regimentation that are grounding forces in his high pressure work and high travel work. I have people who write me who tell me they can't stick to their diet because they're driving 100 miles on a weekend. Here's Trevor, who's flying. I remember one year he went from Russia to Finland to Sweden, back to Russia, then across the Atlantic to Vancouver, then stayed with me in Kelowna, then went to Hamilton, Toronto, Montreal, and then finally home. He was all over the place, and he's doing that and not missing a workout and sticking with a healthy diet. At the same time, clients are writing me saying, oh, I had to drive to the in-laws this weekend. It's 200 miles away and I didn't have time to make my food and I missed my workouts. So again, they're not adopting structure and regimentation as grounding forces that are part of having higher standards, stricter rules, and higher expectations. In other words, they're not expecting a lot from themselves, even though they're expecting a lot for themselves. And you can't change the reality math of that. So very, very important stuff. So outside in to inside out stuff. First, all these things I'm talking about, stricter rules, the higher standards and the higher expectations, they might come from the outside in. Before you internalize them, all goals are within your reach, but establishing that foundation for achievement often comes from the outside in. I know I was young and impetuous and immature, and all of these things that were established in me were established from the outside in, from parenting, from what a lot of people thought was hard parenting. But I've seen the results of that. Now, outside in to adults who have never had to live that way, but who have lofty physique goals, for you trainers out there, you're like the guiding parent. You're like the guiding light, not because you're setting stricter rules, but because you're reinforcing the reminder of stricter rules and the higher expectations and the higher standards. Again, if I wanted to get into Queen's University, there were higher standards for my grades to do so. There were higher expectations of me in order to get in there. If I was just going to leave high school and go into the working world, then nothing would matter. And that's the same thing if people want to eat burgers and fries every day and not follow some kind of diet strategy. That's fine. But for people who have loftier goals, there's nothing wrong with a healthy vanity. Then it's going to take these things that I'm talking about. So personally, the outside in to inside out, here's how it worked with me, just in terms of recall, that people might find interesting. When I was a kid, a Canadian kid, so obviously hockey is on the mind and on the agenda. But my dad was like, if you want to play hockey, you're going to have to take it seriously. And so every day when I got home from school, before homework, I had to go out in the driveway and let my brother and my dad take shots at me because I was a goalie. So we set up a net and they shot pucks at me for like an hour or whatever. And that was constant, and it was every day. And if, I wanted to play hockey, then that was how it was going to be. So it was establishing those kind of rules. Same thing with household chores. I got assigned chores. I got an allowance based on chores. I didn't get an allowance just for existing. I didn't get an allowance just for being in the house. So that outside in stricter rules, was started from an early age. As a student also, I was pretty smart, but I was also really lazy. And when I would come home with grades that were 75, 80, my parents were always, well, what could you have done to get 90? What could you have done to do better? And it wasn't a shaming thing. It wasn't like, well, that's not good enough. It was always, because neither of my parents were educated. It was always supportive. It was always, but could you have done better? And it set your mind to, yeah, I probably could. I probably could have set higher standards for myself and not being so accepting of a B when I could have got an A if I was just a little stricter and adopted higher standards for myself. And then that continued. And then as I got into bodybuilding, I didn't realize how much of that discipline and things I had adopted as I went through that process of having chores, stricter rules, things like that through school, playing hockey on a AAA team, traveling team, the pressure to perform, because if you weren't any good, then, the other goalie played. So you had to practice, you had to show up, you had to do that all while going to school, blah, 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 blah. So as I got into bodybuilding, I didn't even realize it, but what I was doing was I was outworking everybody. And that's why I was winning. I was just cleaning up at everything, and I was miles ahead of every other bodybuilder. Because I was more studious about it. I was stricter about it. I had higher expectations for myself about it. And then when I got to university, not only did I get into university, but what happened was all that outside in discipline from my younger years became inside out discipline. And I won several scholarships for academic performance and intellectual proficiency. I once was the first one in 100-year history of the course in social psychology to receive a grade of 100% on an exam. They called me to the front of the room and all this stuff. And looking back, I realized that what started from the outside in, from having a strict parent who had higher expectations, let me go back to our founding principles here. I had a parent who had higher standards for me. If I was going to play hockey and be a student, there were stricter rules and higher expectations. The expectations were to get A's, not B's. The expectations were to play for a AAA hockey team if you're going to play hockey at all. All those kind of things mattered. And then that's what I ended up internalizing. So I had set higher standards subconsciously for myself and then just adopted and acted naturally. So as a coach in the 90s, all my people, I think, are you not seeing these slides, Monica? Monica's just asking if I can share the slides. I'm going to get to your comments in a minute, folks, because I'm almost done. But then I got to be a bodybuilding coach, and then I could fill in the blanks for other people. What was happening in the 90s is there was Scott Abel's clients on stage and everybody else. If I had a client in a contest, the contest was then for second place because it was just understood that a Scott Abel client was going to win the show and everyone was petrified if I had a client in their weight class in a contest, because then it was considered a done deal. And everyone at the time thought I had all these secret recipes and secret methods. But what I was doing was the outside in expectations for achievement. I was setting higher standards for my clients. All right. I was enforcing stricter rules for them to abide in. All right. And I was making it something I could tell them they could adopt to, that I had higher expectations for them that they may not have had for themselves. And that's the difference that a coach can make. As a performer, I ended up being a real featured guest poser everywhere, like just, from LA, California to Europe to I compose. You can go to my YouTube channel and look up old, they're not in HD, but you can look up old guest posing appearances of mine. I would do 3, 4, 5-minute posing routines, choreographed to music that I did myself. And I find that showing the stricter rules and the higher standards and the higher expectations I had for myself, because now I find it comical and sad and pathetic that in something like bikini and figure, you need a posing coach just to turn sideways 3 times. Whereas I'm doing choreographed routines that I'm choreographing myself for 4 and 5 minutes. And now you need a coach just to turn sideways on high heels. That makes no sense to me. And it's the dumbing down of higher standards and higher expectations, that you need someone else to help you with common sense stuff that any 10-year-old can do. And that's another reason I got out of it. So, and then as an author, how many books have I written now? I don't know, it's 15 or whatever. But as an author, I can tell you, if you don't have stricter rules and higher expectations and higher standards, you can't write a book. You have to read hundreds and hundreds of pages. You have to organize dozens and dozens of pages of notes. You have to put them in a coherent format, and then you have to write whether you feel like it or not. Sometimes a paragraph is painstaking, and sometimes, it free flows. But if you don't have the higher standards, the stricter rules, and the higher expectations, none of that gets done. And one of the things I was going to have Andy on, the cycle diet works on these same principles, as does any weight loss and physique transformation. If you expect a lot for yourself, you have to expect a lot from yourself. And that requires stricter rules and higher expectations that, yes, you get to eat what you want, but not when you want, and not all the time. I look at people my age who think that way, and regardless of what diet strategy they're following, they've all suffered the middle age, pounds, okay, and they've all gained weight. So these things, once they become ingrained in you, become even more important as you age. So here's a review. Set higher standards and accept the pressure that comes with that. Pressure isn't a bad thing. I don't know why people fear pressure and get nervous about it. Invite that pressure because it makes you strong. All right. Steel is made from resistance, right? So very, very important stuff. Set stricter rules and focus on what that offers you, not what it takes away. People will say, oh, well, there's so many rules involved with that. That's not me. I don't want to live like that. Well, then you can't have, a high, lofty goal. It's not just going to fit when it's convenient to you. So stricter rules, again, matter of perception. Focus on what that offers you, not what it takes away. For instance, what stricter rules and higher standards have offered me is I'm more prolific, I'm more productive, and I'm more prosperous than any 9 out of 10 coaches you can mention. And I also have the freedom to structure my own days. Last week, I didn't feel much like working, so I didn't. But that's because I'm miles ahead of what I need to do and when I need to do it. I'm never playing catch up. I'm always in the front. All right. So very, very important. If you set stricter rules and focus on what that gives you, not what it takes away, you will find that eventually stricter rules mean you become more prolific, more prosperous, and more productive. And isn't that what everyone wants? And I'm not talking about being busier. Most people who don't have stricter rules and focus on what they offer are people who are caught in a world of busy. Busy doesn't mean productive. And if we could just, as Gandhi said, there should be more to life than increasing its speed. This is what higher expectations and higher standards and stricter rules give you, is a life of design. So that's very, very important as well. So it's amazing to me how many people say to me, I can't believe how productive you are and how prolific you are. And you're always writing and you're always producing products and you're always doing, they think that all I do is work. Whereas in fact, I probably work less than everyone else, but I structure my work where it is such that when I'm working, There's no TV in the background. I'm not surfing other people's social media pages. When I'm working distraction free. And I've been that way since I was very, very young. And when other people were pulling all-nighters, I won 4 scholarships at university, finished with straight A's, went to grad school, got like I said, several scholarships, won 100% on an exam. And I never once in university pulled an all-nighter, not once. And yet all around me, that's all I saw was everyone panicking and pulling all-nighters because they were screwing the dog when they should have been working during the semester year. But because of that discipline that came from the outside in when I was young, that came from my father, who had stricter rules and higher expectations for me and set higher standards, all I had to do was act naturally with that. And I got to even then live a life of design rather than reaction. So you're not frittering away your time and your energy. So again, this is how you succeed at anything. By living this way, I've never had to lose weight. I've never gained weight. So why would I have to lose it? I've never had to start something over again. I'm always proactive, not reactive. Excuses and rationalizations, what ifs and yeah buts, they don't enter my mental framework. Because why? I have higher expectations. All right. When you have lower expectations, it's easy to let things like the yeah buts creep in. So that's an important element. So along that line, the yeah buts and the what ifs, you have to keep in mind there's always going to be reasons and excuses to not do what you need to be doing to reach or sustain a goal. So you need to stop seeing it that way. Oh, what's my reason today? You've got to stop looking at things like that and seeing it in those terms, because that's just stinking thinking. That's just colored perception, and you're not going to get anywhere with that. So keep this mantra in mind. There will always be reasons and excuses to not do what you need to do to reach or sustain a goal. So that's very, very important stuff. How you succeed at anything is you don't accept the yeah buts and the what ifs. They don't enter your mind. So I would never consider, when I was doing everything right and I had a track record to prove it, I wouldn't change my study habits based on a research article. I wouldn't change the way I was training champions based on whatever was trendy. I would never ask myself, what if I did keto, when a carb-based diet has always been working for me and always been working for my clients? I wouldn't care about that. I would know what the real world of experience has taught me, and I could rely on that, because of the higher expectations and higher standards set for myself allows me a lot of freedoms to know and not think I don't know. So those are other residual benefits of all this kind of stuff. So what you need to do is stop the endless seeking of information and instead make a concrete foundation of these things that we've been talking about. And how many of you are doing that in real ways? Or if you're a trainer, you need to constantly be prodding your clients about this. How many of you are setting higher standards, stricter rules, higher expectations, and getting your clients to live up to that without shaming them into doing so? So again, my book, The Mindset of Achievement, is free. You can get it on my website just by opting in. And that's important stuff. And then mantra. Here's the important mantra to carry over. Have a passion. I'm going to get to your comments in about 2 minutes. So here's an important thing. And I wish more people would get this. When you have higher expectations and higher standards, something else happens. All right. You have a passion for yourself, not your project. All right. I went from, hockey player, student, grad student, scholarship winner, champion bodybuilder, trainer of champions, magazine feature writer and ghostwriter, author, because I have a passion for myself, not my project. Projects are something I do. Passion is something of who I am. So again, have a passion, okay? Have a passion for yourself, not your project. In other words, be passionate, all right? So when you are, okay, being passionate means never having to rely on motivation. There'll be times when you're motivated or not motivated, but you're such a passionate individual as a person, then you can count on that lack of motivation as some kind of biofeedback to back off. You're not seeking motivation. People will often write me and say, oh, I'm really unmotivated. I really need you to motivate me. Oh, I don't motivate. I don't even know what that means. So in other words, you have to ask yourself, who am I being? Who am I being right now? And you have to go from having a passion for your goal to being a passionate person. And then the rest will take care of itself. And how do you do that? Higher expectations, higher standards, stricter rules. Remember always, okay? You've got to always remember respect is earned, and that includes self-respect. And people don't realize that, all right? Way too many people, especially people who are battling weight, they will tell me, well, I'll respect myself more when I lose the weight. Then you're never going to lose the weight. Respect is earned, and you're going to respect yourself more from the doing rather than the reaching, all right? You can't reach a goal by respecting yourself once you've achieved the goal. Achieving a goal is just reinforcement of your higher standards, your stricter rules, and your higher expectations. That's how you earn self-respect. Self-respect is just like respect in general is earned, and that includes self-respect. So you have to keep that in mind as well. So all of those things matter. Very, very important stuff. And I hope that you get that and that it will help you in terms of future ideas and future references and things like that. So I'm just going to once again show where you can get the book. And the book goes, of course, way deeper than the stuff we're talking about. And then that's the important stuff. So scottabelfitness.com/achieve. And you can find the book there as long as you opt in. And so let's just get to your comments. So Monica's just saying self-love comes from high expectations of yourself and for yourself, not leaving behind all that matters and brings you to your greatness. Well, that's pretty wordy. I've never been comfortable with the term self-love. I don't know what that means because it almost sounds like self-adulation or self-admiration. I prefer the term self-respect or self-nurturing. I think anyone can do that. You don't have to like where you are as long as you're doing something about it. So I understand that self-love, I didn't have self-love for a long, long time, but I had the ability to self-nurture and I had self-respect and I worked my way into what other people would call self-love. So Sherry's just saying self-respect is earned. Yep, and it should be a mantra, and that's the way it should go. So important stuff. So now Laura's making a good point. Laura says, wish my mindset was hardwired like this when I was a kid. Thankfully, I have a go-getter mindset now, just thinking about how much more productive I would have been in high school and college. That's the thing. What I'm saying, Laura, is myself very fortunate that I had that kind of parent who gave me the outside in structure, regimentation, higher standards, higher expectations. for trainers and coaches out there, you're going to have clients that have never had this instilled in them, especially millennials who think mediocrity is a lofty goal. Okay. As a coach, you have to know how to coach these things, not shame them into people and not expect that people already have them. That's the sort of whole goal here, is awakening people that if you have a goal of X, then the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to X require certain things. And what are the foundations of those things? Are higher standards, stricter rules, and higher expectations. If I wanted to get into Harvard, I had to have stricter rules, higher expectations, and higher standards than the guy next to me who was just going to party through high school and then go get a job. That's the same thing with physique transformation or weight loss goals. People don't seem to understand that. So, and that's very, very important stuff. And like I said, and just kind of referring to here, if you live a life of discipline, a disciplined life, then you don't have to react to things like having to lose weight. These are things that you're proactive about. So they're not, again, instead of struggling with, you deal with, and that's a whole different mindset. So Perry's just saying, I'm not sure when during the conversation Perry was saying this, but Perry's just saying when people have their own relative truth, then rules are up for debate with them. So as a coach for decades, I've heard and seen every kind of yeah, but, and what if there is. I'll have people writing me, do you coach people with the following problems? And they'll make a scroll list. And basically what they're saying is, I'm special because I have all these limitations. And yet, I keep using the Stephen Hawking example. Like, here's a man who's paralyzed from the neck down, who's the number one of the top physicists in the world. So he never said, well, can you help me be a physicist with all my limitations? And yet people will write and say, I've got low thyroid and I've got this and I've got this. And can you deal with that? But what they're really saying is, will you buy into my limitations and treat me special? And I'm going to respond with the underlying factors of, well, no, I'm going to introduce you to higher expectations, stricter rules, and higher standards. These things apply no matter what your limitations are. So people don't seem to understand that. So very, very important stuff. And yes, you have to invite pressure. Pressure to perform is part of higher expectations and higher standards. There's pressure to perform. So if you're going to balk at that, then you're not living in reality. You're living in fantasy land. There is no higher standards, higher expectations for yourself, and stricter rules without pressures to abide in those things, because you're now different than the pack. Okay, so that's very, very important. Very, very important stuff. So very, very big deal. And especially if you want to change your life, if you always do what you've always done, you're going to always get what you always got. So that's very, very important stuff as well. So, and yeah, you're going to have saboteurs. A lot of people, I get a lot of clients who don't, who have people trying to sabotage them as they start getting results, and they don't like the disruption of the status quo. So you're going to have saboteurs, and that's what I was saying earlier. You can't let other people direct and interfere with your process. If you do, I don't care if it's a spouse, I don't care if it's in-laws, I don't care if it's friends, I don't care if it's office coworkers, whatever. If you're willing to let other people direct and interrupt your process, then your standards aren't high enough and your rules aren't strict enough. So like I said, when it's my birthday, if it's not Sunday, I'll celebrate it Sunday. I'll make a note of it. Oh, had a birthday. I mean, I've often said to myself, I don't get how many times per year do we need to celebrate the passing of a year? We've got New Year's, which is the traditional way. We've got Christmas just before that. That also marks the passing of a year. We have our birthdays, we have anniversaries, we have all the other statutory holidays like Thanksgiving and Mother's Day and Father's Day. I mean, how many times do we need to use that as an excuse to go off track? It has never made much sense to me. And again, that's why I said choose the mature approach, not the infantile approach. And for some for some reason, people that find that to be hard talk, and they find that to be unrealistic talk. Well, I'm talking about realistic talk to people who want to understand the foundations for achievement. If you find this way too hard and not realistic, then your standards are lower, your expectations are lower, and your rules are going to be less, and you're probably not going to achieve your goals. So we are speaking two different languages, and there's no way around that. So Max was just saying earlier that even though he's young, he laughs at it all. You know, he gets up at 4:30. Call with a workout and early bedtime, and he's not going to change. And you will find, Max, in 20 years, you're successful where the other people are still talking about the online rules for success or magic formulas and all the rest of it. So very, very important. Tracy says, I gave up drinking completely, and my friends are constantly asking when I'm going to have a drink with them. It's a personal choice that betters me. None of anyone else's business. Exactly. People need to set boundaries and live by them. It's funny, I remember in university, I really couldn't afford to go to university. So I started practicing a lot of frugal methods. I had to sell my car piece by piece. It was a piece of crap anyway. That's why I had to sell it piece by piece. But I also gave up drinking during those years because I couldn't rationalize myself to use my student loans and grants and stuff to spend money on booze when I really needed to pay rent and buy books and other things like that. So that's part of those negotiating higher expectations and higher standards with what I said earlier, that these things come with collateral damage and you have to make choices. So you can't have everything be the way you want it to be as you try to accomplish something. You're going to have to deal with reality on reality's terms, not the way you want reality's terms to be. So that's very, very important as well. So Monica's just saying this is her favorite webinar. I don't know how you guys feel about that, so hopefully you'll let me know. And yeah, you have to, it's like anything else. Like I said, at first it can come from the outside in. So part of the reason I did this lecture on a webinar on foundations for achievement was because many of you who tune in are coaches in your own right. So you have to understand these things, that a lot of people will come to you as a blank slate. They're going to come asking about keto diets, and they're going to come asking about cardio, and they're going to come asking about CrossFit. And if you do their assessment, you're going to realize that for this particular person, none of that matters. What you have to do is start getting them to buy in to higher expectations, stricter rules, okay? And higher, just higher levels of performance and everything else. So I'll go once again to the very, very top of this so you can see it. Hopefully you can see that again. And then just settle in. For the mantras for success are higher standards, stricter rules, higher expectations, and that's the reality math of it. And any coach out there should begin coaching with that element in mind and keep it in mind all the way through. So, it's important stuff to consider always. So very, very big deal. And that's the way you got to believe in all of what you're doing in terms of those things. So I almost cut myself off there, folks. Sorry about that. So any other finishing comments, top comments, anybody comment on that? Hopefully. Oh, good. Okay. So let me just get rid of that. So Tina's just saying that she enjoyed this. So good. These things are more important than what people are led to believe in the fitness industry. The fitness industry is all about magician's tricks. It's all about getting you to look over there while they do this over here, right? Magic 30-day friggin', 30-day metabolic resets and 12-week competitions and all the rest of it. Well, what's going to establish you to live a life of design rather than constantly chasing tails? And I mean tails, T-A-I-L-S and T-A-L-E-S. You've got to understand this stuff. And then you can just separate yourself from the nonsense, all right? From the fads, the gimmicks, the frauds, because this industry is composed of all those things. And if you don't set these stricter rules, higher expectations and higher standards, then again, as the old saying goes, people who stand for nothing fall for everything. This industry is composed of that, and it's composed of taking advantage of consumers on that level. Catherine's just saying she hasn't had a drink in 18 years, whether it's her choice to drink or lifestyle. They're the ones that are most uncomfortable with it, not me. Sure. And it's the same, like I said, this week I had a client who's now has a dilemma because his significant other, who knew of his fitness lifestyle when they got together, suddenly doesn't like it and suddenly wants change. And then that's a big dilemma. I'm not saying what the answer is, but I know I would never abandon a lifestyle I followed for 4 decades because it doesn't suit someone else. So, that's an important thing to consider. And Catherine's just saying, choosing, I assume she's saying she's choosing sobriety here over what other people expect or uncomfortable with. And sometimes this means you have to change your whole social environment. There's a lot of people who have to, myself, I packed up and moved west. I packed up my life from back east for just too many reminders of who I used to be that I didn't like, who I didn't want to be. And I packed up and I moved west for change of environment, change of people, change of industry. I abandoned the hardcore bodybuilding industry, of course, all the way back then, because I didn't like who I was in it. And, like the old saying goes, if you want to know who you are, look at the people around you. And when I looked at the hardcore bodybuilding world, with all of what I saw, I couldn't really rationalize that I was the exception, not the rule. So I got out of that. So Catherine's making a good point. Sometimes higher expectations, higher standards, and stricter rules means choosing new people to be in your life. And that's, there's nothing like having an enabler in the family. You get 2 overweight people in a family, one's highly motivated to change. And let's say a husband and wife, and they both have 50 plus pounds to lose. And one is a member of the Yeah Sisterhood Club. Like, I want to lose weight. But the other one's highly motivated to change and does. Then now you've got a dilemma because someone's is adopting higher standards and stricter rules, and higher expectations, while the other one is doing a pretension of that. And then that can lead to saboteurs. You end up having enablers, right? Oh, just this once, just, let's just go out and have dessert just this once. At the coffee shop, well, let's just get flavoring in our coffee just this once. So, my strict rules is I have flavored coffee only on cheat days. So that's a big deal for me. Whereas other people have it every day. Part of my stricter rules is no, I'll have it only on my refeed days. So that's important stuff. So, and then Ange is just saying she's going on night shift. So the graveyard shift, and she's prepped her food for the night, and that's her choice. Yeah. And whereas maybe a lot of her coworkers, I hear this a lot from nurses and other people who are in healthcare world, and they don't take care of themselves. They work all these shifts and then they go to work with nothing prepared. So they're eating candy at lunch break. They're eating out of the machines. They're dipping their hand in the cookie jar. Like Ann just saying, people are bringing in donuts and they have no strict rules about it. So again, see, strict rules liberate you. They don't imprison you. You know what I mean? I can go this week, for instance, speaking of Andy Sinclair, meet Andy for coffee at Tim Hortons, and we both look, like little kids at the candy shop. We both press our faces against the window of the donuts. Neither of us are considering having a donut because it's not our refeed day. We go, we meet for coffee, we chat. That's what it should be about. We don't say to each other, oh, I'll have a donut if you have a donut, because we have stricter rules and higher standards. And we're going to do a webinar soon about one of the reasons I love the cycle diet is because it feeds into my love of stricter rules and higher standards and higher expectations. That yes, I may have to wait for refeed day to celebrate my birthday. I may have to wait for refeed day to do X, Y, or Z. I may have to plan my trip to Aruba for 2 weeks off of my diet, but I like that. I invite the pressure to perform. And now, and I'm sure Andy will agree, it's no longer sacrifice. You don't look at it as sacrifice. You look at it as lifestyle. And because I look at it as lifestyle, I look at everyone else around me at my age, and I don't have a goal to lose weight. I don't have a goal to figure out my diet. I don't have a goal to figure out the right program. I create all these things, and I create all these things because I've always established and internalized in myself higher standards, higher expectations, and stricter rules. So, Andy's just saying it's much better to use inspiration as opposed to motivation. Inspiration is part of you. That's what it means in spirit. It's internal, whereas motivation is an external source. So you can use both. You can use both motivation and inspiration, but a lot of it is false agenda. I know people who attend a physique show and after they're all, oh, I went to this show and I'm so inspired and I'm so motivated now. I want to do that. And I want to, all that leads to is a honeymoon period. And that might get you started, but it's going to take something deeper to keep you invested. And that's why I'm talking about, who am I being? If you're being passionate, then motivation is never going to be an issue. And that's something very, very important as well. So let me see if there's any. So with that in mind, folks, I hope this kind of lecture is good for you. I hope you benefited something from it. I don't want to do research stuff every week because, like I said, it's misleading. It's never been a piece of research that I've sent a client that's made the difference in their life. It's always been our ongoing interaction, because remember what coaching is. It's part support and it's part accountability. All right. And you got to realize that. It's like I said within the lecture about my father instilling in me from the outside in the stricter rules and the higher expectations, but in a way that made me accountable for my grades, et cetera, but also supporting me along that, hey, could you have done better? Hey, well, you got a B plus. Could you have got an A? Could you have done? And then by the time I assimilated and internalized all that, I'm a self-motivating, passionate, individual who lives my life on my own terms. And there's no better way of living life than living it on your own terms, with no bosses and no dictators and no one else you have to bend to. So very important stuff. So again, remember, higher goals is only a mere part of it. It's not about what you want. It's about what you do. So the higher expectations, stricter rules, and higher standards are the foundations for achievement. And on that note, please, if you benefited from this, throw some emoticons across the screen. I can't see them with this software. I can only see your comments. So, throw them across the screen, and by all means, hit the share button. Let people know. And once again, you can go to my website, scottabelfitness.com/achieve, and you can find, you can find my book there. And then also, I'll just show you what that looks like in terms, the book cover itself. So that's it. The Mindset of Achievement, How to Achieve Any Goal and Build on It. A book about mindset, mental fitness, motivation and goals, habits, and everything else it takes to succeed long term. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. And thanks for being out there. And I guess I will see you next week. You can always send me topics of what you would like me to talk about. I'm open to that, but I'm not always going to do research. I'll do it, here and there. And I know everybody likes that. But again, there's more important things to discuss. And I am at where I'm at, and I succeeded in everything I've undertaken because of a fitness mindset, a mindset of fitness, and a spiritual underpinning based in these things, these three foundations that have nothing to do with specifics, like what kind of diet, what kind of program. All those things are secondary to the underlying foundations of achievement. So on that note, folks, I'm going to call it a day. It's time to put on my football shirts and get into football Sunday. And I will see you all next week.